My name is Ben Kvalo. I'm the founder CEO of Midwest Games. I've spent my career in the entertainment industry and
Mm,
even starting in radio and then working my way into video games. Was in games for a long time, switched over to films for a little bit
mm.
at Netflix, and then back into games, helping to build Netflix games from the ground up, and then building my own company, Games, which is the Midwest's only video game publisher and Wisconsin's first video game publisher.
What is the foundation of the company? Like, how did that even start or come about?
Yeah, I saw a gap in the market. There's a history of success in the Midwest. If you look at a company like Midway, NBA Jam, NFL Blitz, Mortal
Mhm.
Kombat, that was based in Chicago, but that went out of business almost exactly 15 years ago.
Okay.
And ever since that's been gone, there hasn't really been that tentpole company in the Midwest to help stabilize everything else around it. And so there's been a gap in funding, a gap in support. You need a lot of support services to bring a game to market. Everything from funding to marketing to support services like quality assurance or
Mhm.
localization, production support, release management, being able to get it on a platform. And so all of that was lacking. And so I just saw that gap and I saw an opportunity to build a company where I'm from. And also, there's a lot of dynamics happening in the video game industry right now
Mhm.
around sustainability. There's been mass layoffs. And so, what if we were doing something in a more sustainable place? Lower cost of living for companies, lower cost of labor, but
Yeah.
still a high quality of life. In fact, Green Bay, Wisconsin was named number one quality of life in the US. All of those things moving together, plus me thinking about, well, what's my next step in my career? I helped to
Right.
establish games. Prior to that, I helped build Netflix Films marketing from the ground up. Prior to that, I helped build esports at Blizzard, and prior to that, I helped build 2K as a company. So I've built a lot for other people,
Mhm.
and this is my opportunity to build something for myself, for where I'm from, and hopefully try to change the industry and try to change where games come from by better supporting underserved, underrepresented developers that exist throughout this country and other countries that are
Mhm.
largely ignored. 67% of the games industry is in 3 states in the US. And
Mhm.
so there's an opportunity to make a big change of that, especially post COVID.
You touched on it a little bit. The industry is in a shift as the layoffs and things that
Mhm.
happen. How easy is it for you to connect to these people now, or does it make your job easier now that you may have more access to some folks that you couldn't have because they would have been tied up into some of
Yeah.
these big companies? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, it's completely shifted the industry and really the thinking within the industry. A lot of folks worked at these larger companies because of stability, right? And not working at a startup, you were sacrificing some things, not being able to do as creative work, as innovative work, but you had stability, and that's
Mhm.
gone out the window completely. And so there's a lack of trust now in all of these larger companies, with a couple exceptions. Not only the folks that are out in the market, but the folks that aren't even out in the market, but are just fed up with how they're being treated by these companies, that they're disposable assets, even though
Mhm.
really they're the ones doing the most of the work. The
Right. Right.
executives are ultimately just answering to shareholders, especially any of the publicly traded companies.
Mhm.
And that just sucks. And so
Mm.
for us and every other startup right now or new company, it's a great time to be able to hire top talent, to be able to hire
Mhm.
people with incredible experience, with knowledge of these established companies, with skill sets that perfectly match what we're looking for. So that's advantageous for us
Mhm.
as a startup founder. Some people will start up businesses just when there's a moment like this. And so for
Mhm.
that to happen, but it's a terrible thing to happen ultimately. And it sucks for so many. So many people I know have been affected by it. But what it tells me is we need challengers. We need to think differently about the industry. We need to look at doing things differently. And ultimately, this is our moment as a video game industry, similar to, you think about big tech. There was a moment Apple and Microsoft ruled all with no real challengers.
Right,
And then
right, right.
Google came out of nowhere and disrupted a bunch of things, changed how corporate culture was looked at, how people work. What we look back on is kind of hilarious things that Google brought into the work environment that was
Mhm.
very non-traditional, and it changed how big tech operated. Now I think video games is at that moment as well, where there's going to be a company that comes out of nowhere and
Yeah,
really
yeah.
causes disruption within
Mhm.
the ecosystem, and is a shining example of strong company culture within the video game industry, which is much needed after the many scandals and issues that have
Mm,
happened in the
yeah.
video game industry.
Talk about your journey getting into gaming and just games in general. What was the start for you? I'm sure you were playing games and whatnot. So what were you playing? What's the games that were piquing your interest to make you even want to pursue going down this road to begin with?
I got my hands on about anything I possibly ever could get my hands on.
Mhm.
I was
Okay.
never just focused on one type of game. I just loved games in general. And so from The Legend of Zelda to Halo to Madden to NBA 2K, Borderlands, that's what really got me into it. It's just I gamed a lot. I loved it.
Mhm.
Even though I did a little bit of everything. I played football, baseball, basketball. I was in choir, I was in musicals,
Yeah.
I was in our society, but ultimately the backbone to it all was always gaming.
Mhm.
I loved gaming. I loved what it represented. I loved the worlds you could explore,
Right.
and how it
Mhm.
allowed me to problem solve and critically think about so much. And so as I was looking at my career, it just always was the thing that I wanted to go into. And my dad would always tell me, I'm wasting my time, I'll never do anything productive with video games. And it's hilarious to see the journey past that moment. And I
Mhm.
just fought for what I wanted to do, what I was passionate about, and I matched my skill set to the industry, where I'm more on the business end of things. I'm a half creative. I understand good creative. I can evaluate and find good creative, but I'm not the creator. I know that. And that's okay. Everyone has their different role within the
Right.
industry. And so for me, publishing was my part of the industry. And so I joined 2K in the early days. I obviously loved NBA 2K and NFL 2K back in the day,
Mhm.
and so that's what attracted me to this. And I had played Borderlands 1, and so I joined 2K in the very early days of 2K when
Mhm.
they didn't have really established franchises outside the sports franchises.
Right.
They were a growing company. They put out BioShock and Borderlands. They had acquired Firaxis, which had Civilization. But then we went into the growth mode where we put out a lot more games that gave us chances to build franchises, and then we started to build franchises. So
Mhm.
obviously Borderlands and BioShock are franchises, Civilization is, but XCOM and the growth of Mafia. And we tried a lot of things like Evolve and Battleborn and The Darkness and a lot of other games that didn't quite hit that franchise mode, but it was really
Yeah.
fun to that was the experimental and kind of startup
Yeah, because I'm a
phase.
Mafia fan myself. I enjoyed those games
Oh
personally.
yeah. I worked on Mafia 3 for a long time while I was at 2K. And so I was able to kind of be there, and then that was the growth of NBA 2K.
Mhm.
That period of time that I was there, it went from kind of a middling sports franchise to the best sports franchise in the world, and the highest rated. And so to be able to see that, which was awesome. And so I worked within the operations group. I
Mhm.
was the only person in the operations group except for the executives. And so I got to build a lot of different things. I got to get my hands dirty in a lot of areas. I got to work and I got to work within the HR, the finance, the marketing, and then I helped to build the central technology group at 2K from the ground up.
Okay.
And so that was one of my first big projects. Then was able to do board of directors presentations and even helped support game pitches and help build game studios. I helped
Mhm.
to build or help support the build with the studio head of Hangar 13, which ended up finishing out Mafia 3.
Mhm.
And so that was a really cool experience. And then I was able to move into the marketing group and help reassess how we were looking at global marketing because we were a very North American focused company. Everything, all the decisions were being made out of North America, but so much of the growth was international. And so, how do we change our position so that we are more focused internationally? So, I spent a lot of time living in London, Paris, Madrid, Munich, Amsterdam, and Singapore, learning the challenges and nuances of global marketing and global distribution of games. And so all
Mhm.
of that was just incredible initial experience into the industry.
The technology is starting to get to a certain level. People are starting to use AIs and different
Hmm.
things. How does that affect you as far as when you're creating games? Is it just a tool that makes it easier? Is it a
Hmm.
more of an issue as far as trying to go about certain things? How do you foresee the increase in technology and the increase in all of these different things? How does that pro and con out for you?
Yeah, there's a lot of pros to all of it. It allows more developer accessibility of development to more developers, ease of entry. It just allows for more people to do more with less than ever before, which means that there's going to be more studios, more people developing games, more games coming out, and a lot of them are going to be at a seemingly higher level than they were a generation ago because of the tooling, because of
Mhm.
AI, because of all of these things that game developers have. And there's going to be a lot of game developers that are low code, not as tech savvy developers that are
Mhm.
going to be coming into the ecosystem and learning game development as well. With accessibility, I just see a huge growth in the amount of games, amount of game developers that are coming into the ecosystem, which I think is great. I want to see more game developers. Now, it creates a huge challenge on the back end, which already exists, but is only going to become more challenging, which
Mhm.
is discovery and cutting through the noise
Mhm.
and the whole distribution process. Now, for me, it further sells exactly what we do because that is what we do is we help developers cut through the noise. On
Mhm.
Steam, 98% of games are self-published,
Yeah.
and they only generate about 25% of revenue. So 2% generates 75% of revenue, and those are the published games. Now,
Mhm.
there's over 14,000 games coming out every year on Steam, and so if you don't cut through, you're in that large group that is never noticed. Now, a
Right.
lot of these games don't have the intent to cut through in a bigger way. They're hobby projects. They're not necessarily like full scale games that are meant to be distributed and marketed in larger ways. And so for us, it's about like curating and finding those games, but there's going to be more available in more places, which also goes into our message of game
Mhm.
development can be done anywhere. Talent is everywhere. The next big game is more likely to come from a place that isn't a current hub than it is from a place that is a current hub. And so, how do we support those places more, considering that's only going to grow more and more, especially in the indie space?
Mhm.
AAA controls things a little bit, but even
Yeah.
they have seen that ultimately they need to distribute their workforce a lot more. So it's actually going to start coming from a lot of different places. We're based Green Bay, Wisconsin.
Mm.
Madison has become a game development hub. There's an Activision studio called Raven that works in Call of Duty. EA is building a respawn studio and about to grow that tremendously.
Mm.
There's a PUBG studio. And in fact, the global creative director for PUBG is in Madison. Lost Boys, which is owned by Embracer Group and has worked on things like Diablo and WWE 2K
Mhm.
and a number of other games. And there's also a Bethesda studio called Roundhouse in
Okay.
Madison. And then there's a mobile focus studio or historically mobile focus. I know they work on other things called Purblue. They've worked a lot on Disney's mobile products. All of that is in Madison, all within a 15-mile radius. And so there's
Interesting.
a hub growing right there.
Mhm.
And you can see that there's large companies investing in other places,
Mhm.
partially because the talent is there. And then ultimately the cost of labor is just much lower.
Has Madison always been a tech savvy tech hub, or is this has Madison just invested earlier than other people have? What do you
Mm.
think the reasoning for that is?
As with everything, it's multiple facets of things working together. Madison is a college town,
Right.
ranked one of the top 5 college towns in the country. And so they
Hmm.
have an incredible university, a top 10 public institution. So they have a lot of really incredibly smart people coming into that city. So that naturally creates, a lot of talent and tech talent and talent and creative talent and a lot of different areas that a college town creates. Now, a lot of that historically has gone into more traditional industries like healthcare and
Hmm.
manufacturing and whatnot. But all of that's bubbling on the surface of people create games on the side. Now,
Hmm.
Raven has been around for I think almost 34 years.
Okay.
So they were actually Activision's first acquisition in the 90s. And so they've been the place that's established for a very long time and helped to build up that. So that was a beginning point. But for a long time, they were the only shop in town. And people didn't realize even that video games were being built in Madison. So all that stuff happening in Madison. And then with Chicago, with the game scene really dying down because of Midway's, a lot of talent went to other places, including Madison. And so I think that helped to grow it. And then suddenly a couple more studios started to come in. PUBG getting established. They have a wild story of just a couple students getting hired by PUBG to work on it, and then
Hmm.
doing so well that they were offered to come over to South Korea to work. And they
Oh,
said,
wow.
"Well, can we establish the studio in Madison instead?" And they said yes. Then Madison became a hub for the PUBG. And then all these other studios were being created. There used to be a studio that was called Human Head that had a number of projects, and then eventually became Roundhouse and went under the Bethesda brand. And so all of that was happening.
That you mentioned about the college has gotten into it. I have spoken to a few professors and stuff because now they are looked at as degree programs
Mhm.
in order to do a lot of this stuff. Whereas back in the day, it was just looked at as you just playing games all day. Was there, I'm guessing, incentive as far as a lot of scholarships and things
Mm.
like that, or is that still sort of on the come up? Did Madison kind of lean into that? I guess
No, with a lot of
how it.
game like development
Mhm.
talent, they ultimately have found their way despite the lack of educational resources. So many people are
Mhm.
self-taught, especially coding wise. And ultimately, there's not enough resources, and there's a couple of universities in Wisconsin that have done really well. UW Stout, UW Whitewater, outside Wisconsin, Michigan State, Michigan Tech. DePaul University has an incredible games program. There are absolutely games programs within the region. Madison didn't do as much, although Whitewater is really close to Madison. It's ultimately not like there's been really, really strong programs. There is a growth in this. And what universities are realizing, the ones that are paying attention, is this is almost a $350 billion
Yeah.
industry. It is big, big, big business, 7 times bigger than films, bigger
Mm-hmm.
than music, TV, films
Hmm.
combined. And so it is a huge opportunity as enrollment is going down in so many universities, an opportunity to attach on. Now, I'm not sold esports is the route. Esports is about 1% of the industry. Not that it shouldn't be a piece, it should absolutely be a piece of what a holistic program would look like,
Hmm.
but let's keep it in the percentages of it's 1% of the industry. Too many people have over indexed into esports. Esports hasn't been sustainable. Ultimately, it's a controlled system by publishers. And it would be like if someone owned basketball would have never become the sport that it is today. For universities, it should be a part of their overall program, but they should have game development education. They should have game publishing education. Esports almost fits in kind of the publishing marketing end of things as a component of how you promote, how you grow audiences. Esports does a really good job with that for certain games. There's a lot of growth that these universities have, and they haven't learned quickly, or most have not learned quickly. The ones that do, huge opportunity ahead of them to get a lot of students into a very successful field. I mean, average salary for a game developer is $123,000 a year. That in Wisconsin, the average salary for Wisconsinite is under 60K a year. So
Yeah,
over
so
twice.
you're living like a king out there.
Yes, exactly. A lot of talent went to other places, including Madison. And so I think that helped to grow it. And then suddenly a couple more studios started to come in. PUBG getting established. They have a wild story of just a couple students getting hired by PUBG to work on it, and then
Mhm.
doing so well that they were offered to come over to South Korea to work. And
Oh,
they said,
wow.
well, can we establish the studio in Madison instead? And they said yes. Then Madison became a hub for PUBG. And then all these other studios were being created. There used to be a studio that was called Human Head that had a number of projects, and then eventually became Roundhouse and went under the Bethesda brand. And so all of that was happening.
People don't think of it in those terms. They just
Mhm.
think of it as influencer or being someone who's a streamer. We see how much money that they bring in, so it's hard not to see that.
People don't like complexity. They don't like to simplify things down. And a lot of industries are pretty easy to understand.
Mhm.
Games is not, because it's so multifaceted. A game has music components. A
Mhm.
game has animation. It has artists. It has engineers. It has designers. It has producers. All of these things. And you're just talking about the game development end. Then you jump
Right.
into publishing, and then you have marketers, and you have community support. You have localization producers. You have quality assurance testers and managers. You have people that are just focused on the store pages and your release management, your ability to go on Steam or Xbox and
Mhm.
make sure that you have all your assets that you have. All of these things are combined together into games, which is why it's incredibly complex and really hard for people to understand. But
Mhm.
that's also why it is one of the most incredible industries, because you have to learn to navigate a lot of people that aren't like you, that have different skill sets. And if you can do that well, you can solve vast problems, and you can do things that just other industries can't do. And that's how we're able to entertain the world in much more engaging ways.
Mhm.
Ultimately, films are passive experiences, and a game, one game, even the smallest games, you can enjoy for so much longer than you can a film. A film is 2.5 hours. If a game is 2.5 hours, that's not even a complete game. So that's a very short demo almost.
Yeah.
And so you just can go way more into the storytelling, into so many elements that other mediums can't explore in the same ways
Mhm.
that games can.
Talk a little bit about the games you've worked on, the things that you have been doing and liked, and hype up some of the things you've done.
I got a chance to work in esports at Blizzard. So got to
Mhm.
work on everything from StarCraft to World of
Mm.
Warcraft to Hearthstone to Overwatch.
You have a favorite? You got anything that was sort of, man, that was super fun to work on, sort of thing?
Historically, I think my favorite campaign to work on was Mafia. What we set up with Mafia 3 was so incredible. I remember showing it to press the first time we were in Germany. We got them all into this warehouse like performance space and sat them all down in these leather seats and had them
Yeah.
see the trailer and reveal what it is. We surprised them because Mafia was traditional Italian
Mhm.
mob. Then we switched it to a black protagonist in New Orleans, or New Bordeaux, as we called it, in 1968. At the height of the civil rights movement, it was very different. It was very
Mhm.
provocative. It told a meaningful story. And the music that was absolutely incredible. Some of the music
Mhm.
of that time, that era, was incredible. What Hangar 13 and before them, and all the teams that worked on that, what they did was incredible. Now it got compared to GTA and others, and
Mhm.
ultimately probably didn't perform quite as well as they wanted it to
Yeah.
be. But
Mhm.
still, it was incredible what they were able to put together with a fraction of the team size comparatively to a GTA type
Yeah.
game, and the
I mean, it's
story and
more of that
everything.
whole story versus the whole
Hmm.
bottom dollar of
Yep.
the live subscription, but like Mafia, like you said, that was more about the whole story-based games are sort of getting lost in the shuffle because
Mhm.
it's just not a live action, something you can keep people putting money
Yeah.
into over and over.
Gotta put the
So,
budgets accordingly. The
yeah.
budgets have to fit what a single player is. But last year, the biggest game of the year was a single player game, Hogwarts Legacy. That was the biggest
Mhm.
selling game and had a finite
You know, I was
experience.
one of them because I got it day one. It's so weird just because I love playing that game. Great game to play, but it's like I guess people don't necessarily see the playability, replayability or whatever, but I still replay The Witcher. I
Yeah,
still
yeah.
replay games all the time if it's good enough to play, like Red
What?
Dead, like
Skyrim, Fallout.
Skyrim.
If
I,
they're
I
good, they're
definitely,
good. Make a good game, and
yeah, and give
ultimately
people
it
a good
will.
experience. I
There's
mean,
3.8 billion gamers worldwide, or an estimate that's going to get to 3.8 pretty soon here. And that means there's plenty of people. You need a fraction of the audience to succeed. Of
mhm,
the playtime last year, I think Hogwarts Legacy had 0.8%,
mhm,
and made over $1 billion. You don't need actually that much to succeed in a huge way in this industry, and that's what people don't always comprehend. Because the minute you get into billions, people literally like it's our brains. They can't comprehend that size of audiences and whatnot. It's all about like comparing your potential actual audience to what you're spending. So yeah, like Mafia was great to work on, and then ultimately what I'm loving right now is being able to uplift developers. So we've signed 8 games so far at Midwest
mhm,
Games. We put out a game called Duck Paradox into early access, which
mhm,
is an incredible platformer that is ducking hard. Like I like
mhm.
to call it Duck Souls because it's so hard. There's a demo on Steam if you want to play it as well. It is incredibly difficult, a lot of fun, and it's all about this Dr. Paradox that accidentally loses her duck into a multiverse, and she has to go in after it and try to save her duck, but there's evil versions of her duck that come out of nowhere, and you have to survive. It's a bullet hell game. Every bullet you fire, if you miss it, it ricochets around the level until it hits something. So we put out that. We have another game called The Lullaby of Life.
Talk a little bit the things that you have been doing and liked and hype up some of the things you've done.
I got a chance to work in esports at Blizzard. So I got to
Mhm,
work on everything from StarCraft to World of
mm.
Warcraft to Hearthstone to Overwatch.
You have a favorite? You got anything that was sort of, man, that was super fun to work on, sort of thing?
Historically, I think my favorite campaign to work on was Mafia. What we set up with Mafia 3 was so incredible. I remember showing it to press the first time we were in Germany. We got them all into this warehouse like performance space and sat them all down in these leather seats and had them
Yeah.
see the trailer and reveal what it is. We surprised them because Mafia was traditional Italian
Mhm.
mob. Then we switched it to a black protagonist in New Orleans, or New Bordeaux, as we called
No
it,
wonder.
in 1968. At the height of the civil rights movement, it was very different. It was very
Mhm,
provocative. It told a meaningful story. And the music that was absolutely incredible. Some of the music
mhm.
of that time and that era was incredible. What Hangar 13 and before them, and so all the teams that worked on that, what they did was incredible. Now it got compared to GTA and others, and
Mhm.
ultimately probably didn't perform quite as well as they wanted it
Yeah.
to be. But
Mhm.
still, it was incredible what they were able to put together with a fraction of the team size comparatively to a GTA type
Yeah.
game. And then we have a number of other games. We're about to announce another game that we just signed, and then we have other games called Rah Rah Boom and Dark Sky that we've announced as well. So we've announced 4 of the 8 so far. We're going to announce some more, and we're working to sign some more.
I'm browsing on the site right now, just looking at the screenshot. So for people that don't know, Duck Paradox looks this will be very nostalgic for you if you really like the old platformy game. But you can definitely tell it's modernized, but it still like has that old school swag
Mhm.
feel. It's definitely colorful if you're into that sort of thing. So yeah, definitely check that out. Lullaby of Life. That looks very colorful as well.
Yeah, cozy.
Very, yeah, very artistic. I almost want to say coloring book y comic booky-ish, sort of type of vibe, like very cartoonish, very sort of anime-ish type of vibe.
Mhm.
Definitely different vibes, definitely different. This one says it's puzzles, so definitely put your thinking cap on if you're playing some
Mhm.
of these games, which I do like some of those games. And you said all of these on Steam.
Yeah, all of them on Steam, and you can find them under our Steam, page, Midwest Games, as well. They're all
Cool.
listed.
Plug whatever you got. If you got
Yeah.
anything coming up, you got media, whatever you got, plug away.
Yeah, you can follow us, pretty much on Midwest Games on any social media site. We're on Steam. You can follow our publisher page, and then you can follow our individual games. They are Rah Rah Boom, Dark Sky, The Lullaby of Life, and Duck Paradox. We'll be announcing some more coming up, so definitely follow us on socials because
Mhm.
we have some exciting announcements, some pretty big announcements. You can also follow me on LinkedIn. That's where I have my largest following, just my name, Ben Kvalo, and the only one in the world, so really easy to find.
Cool.